Hi everyone, welcome. I'm Eleanor. Today is the 27th day of August, which means that it's the 27th day of the Sealy Challenge. I'm not at home, I'm not in my library or my kitchen, but I have read Sappho and I'm calling it Sappho Saturday. Now, I have had this edition, this translation of Sappho on my bookshelf for years and years when someone recommended it, and I never really picked it up. But it looks like I am very interested in Sappho because I also picked this up a couple of years after that, but the Aaron Carson version. And you can see, this is Mary Barnard, this is Aaron Carson. We're talking about a poet, Sappho, who lived from approximately, I think, 630 BCE. She was a musician and poet, and only tiny fragments of her poems have survived. So what we have is about 10% of her probable output. And several of her poems come to us secondhand as quotes from other people. So I think that the thing that most people know about Sappho is that she lived on the island of Lesbos, and she has inspired the name lesbian. So it is thought that she was gay, and many of her poems are about young women. Now, if you go to Mary Barnard's edition, she doesn't mention that at all. She actually, this came out in 1958 originally. She actually mentions that perhaps the girls were under Sappho's tutelage, perhaps they were learning the art of poetry, perhaps she was schooling them. And Carson mentions it in a brilliant way. She has an introduction that's brief but perfect. And Aaron Carson says, "It seems that she knew and loved women as deeply as she did music. Can we leave the matter there?" Which I very much appreciate, because there really isn't, it's all really hearsay. We're not, you really choose your own story with Sappho, pretty much. But then there's another, when I knew I was going to do the Sealy Challenge and I thought I'd like to do Sappho, ahead of time, I bought this book. So Aaron Carson came out in 2002, and then this came out later. This is Aaron Poochigian's translation, and that came out 2009. And what his specialty is trying to remain true as much as possible to the form of the poems and not necessarily thinking only of the content. So he tries to rhyme the poems. So we've got 3 different books, and it looks like, oh, Eleanor, did you read 3 different books? Well, no, but I mean, reading Sappho in itself is different from reading anything else because the fragments are tiny. So I started with this one because this is really the easiest. This is made to look like it's a book of poems. Sappho didn't collect her poems as far as we know, and most of the fragments, they don't really add up to very much at all. But Mary Barnard simply adored the fragments and she just went for it. So she took some fragments and made them titles, and then she made the titles first lines, and I think it's genius. For example, "It is clear now, neither honey nor the honeybee is to be mine again." See? And you can read the whole book. It's all like that. And it's fantastic. You find out about Sappho's ability to describe small flowers, the sound of certain music. She describes the community, the society she's in. There is a lot about love. There's eroticism. There are wedding, there are wedding poems. If you know J.D. Salinger and you know one of the titles of his books is Raise High the Roof Beam Carpenters. I always wondered where that came from. I thought it was a biblical reference, but it's not. It's from Sappho. You know, here comes the bridegroom, raise high the roof beam. It's beautiful. So that's what I'm talking about with Fragments. Now, when you go to Anne Carson, you have, because she herself is a classicist, she's not going to do that funny business with the lines. She wants to keep to the exact, as much as possible, way that she's going through the fragments. So what she's done is she's put the original on this side, and then the translation here with brackets for any word that's missing. So you can't quite see what it is, but you know there was something there. And so when you flip through this book, it's sort of like flipping through a picture flip book. You know when you sometimes flip a book and you can see the sketch of the man walking or something like that. And it's possible to really enjoy it in that way as long as you enjoy somewhat experimental poetry, because it's going to sound like something someone might have written, if you read it from cover to cover, like someone might have written today and in a very experimental manner. So she says that in the foreword, Anne Carson says that she actually thinks that seeing the brackets can be a very enjoyable experience. It's a bit like hide and seek or choose your own story. And once she said that, I changed my view and I enjoyed it much more. And I enjoy the mystery of this. So while this satisfied my desire to actually read Sappho, it wasn't really reading Sappho. It was reading Sappho via Mary Barnard. This, it's almost as if, it's Anne Carson taking you right up to the original remaining work and giving you an idea of what it must be like to look through it. I'll give you an example. Some of the pages are just this, and I actually quite liked it after I got used to it, so I'll read it. As long as you want. Next page. And I on a soft pillow will lay down my limbs. Next page. Eros shook my mind like a mountain wind falling on oak trees. You came and I was crazy for you, and you cooled my mind that burnt with longing. So if you're patient and you open yourself to it, I'm actually thinking Anne Carson's version is my favorite. Although, up until this moment, I really was leaning towards that first one with Mary Barnard because I found this to be a challenge. Yeah. So then you go to the one that came out most recently, which is Aaron Poochigian's 2009 version, which I bought for the Sealy challenge because I thought, well, I've had those two on the shelf and I haven't been able to crack into them, so maybe I need this version. And this version is completely different because he has decided to try to capture some of the form in which Sappho wrote, and to him that meant working in some meter and rhyme. And what I like about it, again, is that it feels more like poetry, more like traditional poetry. For example, you'll have a poem like that. And then what I also like is on the facing page, he has his commentary, which is very handy. Anne Carson has her commentary at the end, and so you have to constantly flip back, and it's cumbersome. So here's an example. This is what it looks like. This is the poem. That's the commentary. Some call ships, infantry, or horsemen the greatest beauty earth can offer. I say it is whatever a person most lusts after. See, he's trying to get the rhythm. He's trying to get the rhyme. Look, I like all three. I think I'm most fascinated now by the Anne Carson. And what I would say is, generally speaking, I'm actually quite surprised that Sappho has made it to 2022. I actually really am. Because the fragments are so tiny. And there doesn't seem to be much of a narrative. There's much more unknown than known. I think that's what's surprising to me. There's so much unknown about these poems. So you can't really say who the characters are she's naming. It's hard to know anything about the context in which she wrote. You'd have to do research and read a lot, which most, people don't want to do. And yet she's so well known and so loved. It's fascinating to me, and I'm really looking forward to reading the book that everyone's talking about. The book is called After Sappho by Selby Wynne Schwartz. It's on the long list for the Booker. And I'll leave a link to two booktubers I love, Fraser Simons and Shelley Swearingen. And they discuss the book. So I think that might be interesting. Yeah. So let me know if you have read any Sappho and what you think. And don't forget, the only real property is the property of the mind, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.